Well, hello again, guys, and for what should be the final time walking up and down this terrace here at Goodison Park. Yeah, I will miss the place, even though we've gone out on a goalless draw, but it was certainly a stalemate with a hell of a lot to pick through. And I think we've got to start at the top. The headline news for me, no, it's not Anthony Gordon missing a penalty, it's Newcastle dropping 2 points. I thought they did more than enough to win that game. And yes, there were positives, and we'll go through those positives. That performance was unrecognisable, really, from what we've seen on the road already this season. And for that, there is encouragement to be had. I thought there were 3 or 4 very good individual displays as well, a couple which were concerning. But ultimately, and I don't want this to sound negative because it's a positive in a way, you don't get these games back. That's that game gone now. Bournemouth have won here, Brighton have won here, and if Newcastle want to be a team who finishes in the top 6, and they should be aiming for that, and no, they are, I think you've got to win this. Now, ultimately, there's mitigation against not winning in the place they didn't have on the pitch, but is that not a fault of the club in that they've left themselves, and this was, I dedicated an entire video to this last week, they've left themselves with 2 strikers who do miss games, and that now is 5 matches since the start of last season when Callum Wilson and Alexander Isak haven't played for Newcastle. Total points, 3. They've won none of them. And there again today, and it was a question I've just asked of Eddie Howe downstairs, and I put it in a manner where I just wanted it a yes or no, and I think he knew that. I said, with Alexander Isak or Callum Wilson, do you win that game? He said, well, it's very hard for me to be definitive, but I do think we have a much better chance of doing so. Yes, and of course you might say that is stating the obvious, but isn't it stating the obvious to say that they should have done more to have a better backup option in that area? Now, when I did this video last week, a lot of the comments below the line were saying, do you just think money grows on trees? You want a centre-half, you want a right winger, you want everything, you know, you've got to spend 40, 50 million pound on a striker to get that quality. Well, you don't really. You know, they've committed 10 to 15 million pound on Willisula, yet when the team needed a central striker there in the second half, they tried 3 different players. You know, Anthony Gordon, Harvey Barnes, Miguel Almiron have all had to go through the middle at some stage there. When it was crying out for a striker to be there for Newcastle, Willisula didn't come on. And this isn't me saying Willisula is the answer by a way. It's not, you know, I trust the guys who are seeing him in training every day I trust Eddie Howe to know that, to make the judgment call on whether he's ready or not. The point I make is that Newcastle have spent that money and they haven't really given themselves an option to come on in for 10 to 15 million pound. I think if that's all you've got to play with, okay, fair enough. But I think it's on you to go out and spend that on a player who can come in and impact in a situation like when your team desperately needs a striker on the pitch there today. And you might be shouting back at me, who? Well, okay, Morgan Rogers was down the road at Middlesbrough last season. He went to Aston Villa for a similar figure. Liam Delap scored again there today for Ipswich. He went for a fee in the same sort of region, same age, same sort of profile. So there are players out there. I think for Newcastle to have their only money outlay on a player who doesn't play, well, that for me is costing them, especially when it's in a position we flagged for so long. And again, the opening 2 minutes of this might sound negative, but ultimately it is the reason why they haven't won there today, the fact that Wilson nor Isak is on the pitch. And in a strange way, you know, I think they actually miss Callum Wilson in games like that, perhaps more than they do Alexander Isak, someone who is just there in the box. How many times did Newcastle have possession, have territory in that final third, and it was just crying out for someone like Wilson just to be there to score, because we know that is what he does. You know, his chance conversion when he does get those chances, those half chances, was quite incredible. So for me, Callum Wilson was arguably the biggest miss of all there today. But on the general performance, and why did they get themselves in a position for us to be reflecting here now, saying that it is 2 points dropped? You know, the game down at Fulham, that wasn't a point or 3 points dropped, that was just a defeat, and a deserved defeat. But this was different, and it was the question I put to Eddie in the press conference yesterday, that will this game be more informative than Manchester City a week ago? And by that I meant you'd expect the team to raise the game at home to Manchester City, coming away to Everton on the road, where performances this season have been poor to very poor, really. You know, the phrase I use is they've looked like an away team this season. Well, there was large spells there today when Newcastle didn't, when Newcastle just looked like the better team. They looked like a team who was in control. And as I say, that was encouraging. Now, to revisit the game and pick through, there's a hell of a lot to pick through in terms of penalties, non-penalties, all the rest of it. But it started with a real intensity, I thought, from both sides. Brilliant noise in here. It really is a terrific place to cover football, even though sometimes because of those pillars behind us, you can't actually see what's going on. And I know when I put one comment on X with regards to the non-award of Everton's penalty, guys, bear in mind, I've got one of those pillars in front of me there. So, yeah, my take on it, having only seen it first time, we didn't have replays in the press box. I've only seen it once. I said it looked like a penalty. It did look like a penalty. Now, we'll revisit that in just a second. But to go back over the game, and this brings me on to, again, I keep on using these words, positive and negative. Please, I'm trying to be realistic and trying to be honest. Newcastle's ball retention. Now, from the off, for all there was the good, and I thought, the approach play was better. Certainly the first 2/3 of the pitch looked much better solidly, defensively, best they've looked on the road this season, going through into midfield, that approach play, that build-up play, there was a lot more control there. But come on, how many times at key moments do they just give the ball away? Lewis Hall did it twice inside the first 2 minutes. Bruno had one. Tonali had... We've got to get back to talk about Tonali. It's part of this video, but Tonali was giving the ball away in the first half. Harvey Barnes, a couple of sloppy ones, and from giving the ball away, Everton actually scored a goal. Okay, Doucouré was offside, but nonetheless, that sort of served warning of how this sloppiness could punish Newcastle at a time in the game when they looked like the better side. Now, on the back of that goal, there was a real 5-minute lull where it seemed to raise the home crowd and raise Everton. And I thought, oh goodness, this is starting to smell like a little bit of a defeat. It's starting to smell like previous away performances. But Newcastle recovered from that. They finished the half the stronger. Now the penalty, Newcastle's penalty, goodness me, it's just a penalty. I don't know what James Tarkowski is thinking when he hauls Sandro Tonali to the ground. And now one of the big questions, and there's a lot of retrofitting, I think, after timing on this, why didn't Fabian Schär take it? Come on, give over. Honestly, Anthony Gordon took a brilliant penalty last week. He's been practicing penalties all summer with England. If you'd asked me at the award who takes this, given the occasion, Gordon coming back here, would any of that been in my thinking? Absolutely not. And Anthony Gordon, actually, he has the exact same run-up as he does a week ago. He puts his body shape as if he's going to put it in the bottom right-hand corner as he's looking last week against Manchester City. He whips the ball across his body into the bottom corner. Like I say, he's been practicing all summer with England. He didn't have much else to do, sadly, out in Germany. But this time, he actually puts it where his body telegraphs it. Now, you can do that if your connection is true, if your connection is sweet, if it's so quick that it gets there before the goalkeeper does. But it was a poor connection, and Pickford actually, in the end, almost dives past it. I think he saves it with his knees. Again, I see, we haven't got replays. I've only seen it once at half-time there. So yeah, it looked and felt like a really poor execution. And that can happen. Now, was it Gordon coming back here affected by all of that? Maybe only he knows. But what I will say is, to his credit, he didn't hide after that. He came back for more, and he, out the front three, for me, was by far the best and the one who kept at it and caused Everton the most problems, even if, again, his execution late in the game when he goes through, that lets him down. Now, I'm sort of running ahead of myself here, but you go into half-time, and it's there to be won. We're stood in the press box there, and this here, there's probably only going to be one winner based on what we'd seen in the opening 45 minutes. You come out in the second half, and again, Newcastle are the better side. Now, we've got to talk about the other penalty incident. It came from Sandro Tonali, given we'll marry these two together, Tonali and the penalty. It came from Tonali giving the ball away cheaply. And on first viewing, I honestly think just Dan Burn is incredibly clumsy. It looks like a penalty, and everyone in the press box says so. Now, honestly guys, I've only seen one or two replays back, so don't sort of jump on me for this. And apparently there is an angle out there that shows that Dominic Calvert-Lewin kicked Burn. I need to go away and see that. I'm still not entirely convinced, because I don't think Dan Burn gets the ball, but if he's getting his body across Calvert-Lewin, then that's an Everton player shouting up there. I don't know if he disagrees with my take on the penalty there. I was being kind. I thought it might have been a penalty, but no. The resounding verdict on X, and those who have actually seen far more replays than me, seems to say not. So I'll go with that. But we've got to talk about how Newcastle got themselves in that position. And actually, after the coming together of Burn and Calvert-Lewin, the ball rolls for Idrissa Gueye, and he's got to score. He puts that over the bar. And if Everton get that, that's 1-0. Only probably potentially, given Newcastle seemed incapable of actually putting the ball in the back of the net at the other end, that's probably a 1-0 defeat you're reflecting on. And it came from Tonali, and I've seen a lot of disagreement as to his performance tonight. Now, I didn't think it was very good. I must admit, I was on the Mail Sport merit ratings. I've given him a 5 out of 10. I thought at times in the first half he was sloppy, and I say this in the context of him being a fantastic, wonderful technical player who, at a game like this, against, for me, poor opposition, a game you've got to come and win, and you've actually got space at times. It opened up there in the midfield, especially in the second half. Why wasn't Tonali picking those passes? Why wasn't he driving forward, breaking the lines? I know he had a good chance early in the second half where it's blocked and he gets on the end of one corner, so it wasn't all bad. But when you look at him at his best, at times what he produced against Manchester City last week, certainly that comeback game against Nottingham Forest when he was absolutely majestic, we didn't see that there tonight, and I'm still not convinced of his absolute effectiveness away from home. I think he's a wonderful, lovely footballer in time. That midfield three of Tonali, Bruno and Joe Linton, I think that is certainly worth, the next game. Put those three back in there, definitely worth persevering with. This isn't me a year ago when I was saying, hold on a minute, guys, this just isn't working. It actually needs to change, which it did change, remember. Don't forget, Sean Longstaff did come back in. But I still think for now, Tonali's got a little bit to prove. Let me know what you thought of him below the line. I think it's a fascinating debate and point on him. But nonetheless, he goes off in the changes. The players who come on, I thought, did tremendously well. Tino Livramento, I know the game had opened up by that point, and Everton actually looked really unfit compared to Newcastle in the last 15, 20 minutes. And it was so crying out for Newcastle just to go and win it. Livramento did well. Almiron was fantastic when he came on. He plays the ball which springs Gordon clear, and didn't you just know it was just that sort of night, and Gordon puts it over the crossbar there. But, those changes had Sean Longstaff as well, who came on for Tonali. I thought he was really solid in midfield. And sometimes when Longstaff is out the team and then he does come back in, you can see that in him. I think he had a positive impact there. I wouldn't advocate him coming back into the side. As I say, I would still stick with those three in midfield. But nonetheless, the subs had a positive impact. And at a time where you're thinking, this is actually what Newcastle need now to go on and win the game. And they just didn't, and they just couldn't. And that's so frustrating, because to go back to the very top of this video, you don't get these games back. And that, for me, is 2 points dropped, in part in the isolation of what happened here tonight by that execution and that quality in the final third, but also going back to the mismanagement of 2 years now when Newcastle have not signed a viable striker to come in the event of Wilson and Isak being injured, which, as we know, there are long periods when they are. Now, we've got Sean Dyche just walking out over my shoulder there. I wonder if I can get his thoughts on the Everton non-penalty. But thankfully now, just so he doesn't shout in like one of his players did, I'm going to talk about Newcastle's merit stars. And I'm going to do this in ascending order. And the 1 star, this actually goes to 2 players because I wanted to get one of them in there. I'm going to give them to Anthony Gordon and Miguel Almiron. I just thought Almiron coming off the bench there, a player who's largely been written off to a degree. I think if Newcastle could have sold him in the summer, they would have done. He's found himself behind Jacob Murphy, but when he came on, he was lively. I thought he was incisive, and he looked one of the best bets for either creating a winning goal or scoring the winning goal. So Almiron gets a nod, and Gordon too, for missing the penalty, and it wasn't a good penalty, and for missing the chance at the end. Nonetheless, wow, did he give it absolutely everything. He was on the ball so much in the second half, and I think Gordon deserves praise for that. I really do. 2 stars, Joe Linton. Now, I do this because it was so encouraging just to see his aggression getting in Everton's face, getting up and getting down. Now, was the quality there on the ball? No, it wasn't. He was another one who was guilty of being sloppy at times. There was a couple of really frustrating moments, that final pass where he's either played it behind a teammate and promising breaks, or the shot, his balloon shots over the bar. But in terms of that aggression and that energy and being an influence and a positive influence on the midfield, I thought that was back there. So Joe Linton gets 2 stars for that. And the 3, they go to Bruno Guimaraes. I was critical of him after the game down at Fulham, where it was one of his worst performances in a black and white shirt. He's responded with 2 very good ones. Last week against Manchester City, and there again, he was never not on the ball. And while all those around him were very wasteful, I thought he was the one who kept it really well. He showed calmness, he showed class, he tried to pick balls forward. I thought he was better defensively as well. You looked at Everton's team sheet, and Dwight McNeil in the number 10 has had a brilliant game last week, scored the 2 goals from that domain. A lot of talk about him coming into the game. Would he exploit that problem area between Newcastle's back 4 and Bruno? Well, no, he didn't. I thought going forward and going back over Bruno was very good, and I'd have him as Newcastle's star man. Well, guys, before I go, I'm going to give you one final scan of this place. Whether Newcastle win, lose or draw here, I always think it's just a fantastic old football ground in Ireland. I'll certainly miss it. Now, on the subject of new stadiums, Newcastle's, that really is a hot topic at the moment. And below the line, I'm going to post a link to an article I've written for Mail Sport today that has a lot of stadium information in it. And it's asking the question, after 3 years of Saudi ownership, the anniversary is on Monday, are they still interested in Newcastle? That, by the way, is not me saying they're not. The article explores that and comes to a resounding conclusion at the end of it. So plenty to pick through in there, lots of detail, including a very interesting summit up at Matford Hall last week that I think is very significant. There probably will be more to come from the content of that. So in terms of content, guys, for now, that is me done here today. I'm off with England this week, down at the game on Thursday at Wembley and then out in Helsinki. Now, I might, if I've got time, and I think I might do, because I've had a cancelled flight on the way back next week. Now, the alternative, they sent me the alternative was to come back at 6 o'clock in the morning. They thought that was the best option. The other was to get a 6 o'clock flight at night, which meant I could have a whole day in Helsinki, rather, wandering around. I might have a couple of beers and make a video when we can perhaps reflect on this, third quarter-way stage Newcastle season. So put some questions below the line. I'll answer them while I'm out there. So for now, guys, yeah, like I say, one last scan. Thank you again for watching. Please hit like, comment, subscribe. Yeah, below the line, who played well? Am I a little harsh on Tonali? Was Bruno Newcastle's best? Is that 2 points dropped? Is that a game they should be winning? And what sort of state have they left themselves in at centre forward? Those names I mentioned, Rodgers, Delap, are these players Newcastle's scouting department should have unearthed instead of? Will Asula could go on to be a superstar, but he's clearly not ready and not trusted at the moment. What do you think of all that? Comments below the line. Okay, guys, see you soon. Bye-bye.